we saw the funeral procession of President Carter. The Clintons were there, the Bushes were there, uh, Obama was there, and Trump was there. And in your piece, you talk about the bad blood that existed between Carter and Clinton back that goes back to 1980. You talk about how Carter meddled in the Gulf War and how that created some tension with Bush. And then Trump, who represents the opposite of everything that Carter stood for.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about those relationships between the presidents.
Yeah, so I think we all got a terrific view, even though there was no sound of the complex dynamics in that very small club, which only has 5 members now. And um, so, yeah, Carter in many ways got along. He didn't get along with Reagan at all. He had very bad, bitter feelings toward Ronald Reagan. And Rosalind, in particular, despised Reagan. And she told me at one point that a Confederate flag that hung in a house across the street from the Carters in Plains, she said it wouldn't have been there without Reagan because
Mm.
he gave people permission to be comfortable with their prejudices. And she felt the same about Trump. Um, uh, but besides Reagan um, and George W. Bush, the other two Republican presidents, Gerald Ford and George H.W. Bush, whom I interviewed about Jimmy Carter, Carter had his best relationships with those two, notwithstanding what happened during the Gulf War. And George H.W. Bush was very complimentary toward Carter when we spoke. But he had a very fraught relationship with Bill Clinton, and he that started in 1980 when Castro emptied his jails, and they had something called the Mariel Boat Lift, and a bunch of many of them were criminals, some were not, um, some were political prisoners, were uh, just unloaded on the United States on boats by Fidel Castro in 1980, and Carter sent them to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, to be processed. And they needed to find out which were violent, which could be released into American society. By this point, they're all Cuban Americans, but at that time they just arrived, and they ended up rioting at Fort Chaffee. And Bill Clinton felt that this cost him reelection as governor of Arkansas in 1980. And then when Clinton was president, he thought that Carter was a kind of freelance Secretary of State. And I have a chapter in my book that's mostly about this in his very best, that's about uh, what happened between Carter and Clinton in 1994 when Carter and Sam Nunn and Colin Powell went to Haiti, and they prevented a war in Haiti in 1994. And Carter went to North Korea and prevented a war in North Korea. Would have been a bad one. But both times, instead of going directly to the White House when he got back to give a report to the president, Carter went on CNN and was kind of freelancing and was at odds with U.S. policy. And when he got to the White House, um, um, Bill Clinton started screaming at him. They had
Oh,
serious,
wow.
which I have, this and a lot of other stuff about Camp David and all kinds of other things, not in that article that you referenced, but in his very best Jimmy Carter Life, which is, the biography that I wrote of him. So uh, the relationship continued to suffer um, when Carter would say critical things about not just Bill Clinton, but Barack Obama. he had been very much for Obama, but then he felt Obama was ignoring him, and it made him it ticked him off. It ticked Carter off, and so he didn't really feel that he needed to restrain himself in saying what he thought about, say, the drone strikes that Barack Obama was authorizing. And but then at the end of his life, when he was ailing, my wife and I went to Jimmy and Rosalind Carter's 75th wedding anniversary in Plains, Georgia. And to the amazement and surprise of the Carter family, Bill and Hillary Clinton, along with Nancy Pelosi, came to the party, paid their respects. So I think Clinton figured this is his basic view is, he requires forgiveness, so he forgives other people,
Mm.
and it's a pretty good way to live.